Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Recitations of the Unfinished Memoirs, showcased by Mukti online channel, produced by Bongobhondo Sangskritik Jote, London branch. I want to give my first and foremost my amazing gratitude to Nazrul Islam Okib, who has been helping us with the technical support and guidance. And this show is a platform and a program for young talent to showcase and to elevate, and we celebrate their insights and opinions and thought-provoking conversations. So now I'm going to introduce you to my amazing guests that I'm so grateful are here for the very first episode. So my first guest is Fazi Maknoon, and then it is Afrin Qureshi, and finally, but last but not least, columnist and poet Romy Hawk.
Hello.
So I want to just have some, just explain to you what we're going to do in this program going forward for our audience, as my guests already know. So every episode will have a certain theme as we read passages from Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's Unfinished Memoirs. Now, this is an unprecedented document. This is personal viewpoints of Bongobhondo from the 1940s up until the 1950s. It has every part of his life in his own words, and it's very rare to have a document like this that is a clear part of history. Now, my guests have happily and willingly agreed to read some passages, and we're going to have some thought-provoking questions and conversations on the content. And this is a platform where there's going to be a lot of stimulating conversation, and there's going to be a lot of celebration of history, culture, and heritage. And I just wanted to say before we begin, there's a lot of historical context to what we read, and there's going to be, there's discussions and talks of some divisions between different kinds of people, but I just want to make sure and let everybody know that this is a platform where it's going to be very positive, forward thinking, where every person from every religion, race, sexuality, gender is going to be celebrated, and this is a very progressive platform. So before I begin, I wanted to read a part of the preface, because it was a passage that meant a lot to me when I was reading, and I thought it really brought in and gave me a lot of comfort in the dark times that we have, and I hope it'll bring some relief to you. And please, if you're enjoying this program, like, comment, share, go harass every family and friend. We're on Facebook and YouTube, so really there's not really any excuse not to watch the program. So I just wanted to start before I let my young talents and my amazing guests begin. So the bit that I wanted to read, that really I wanted to kind of set the tone for the program, was from Sheikh Hasina in her preface in the Unfinished Memoirs. So the passage goes: "When I had the notebooks in my hand, I was at a loss for words. The handwriting was a very familiar one. I called my younger sister, Sheikh Rahana. Our eyes were soon awashed in tears. We went over the lines our father had written with our hands so that we could touch him again. It was as if our father was blessing us through the notebooks just after I had come back from the dead. I still had work to do for the poor people of our country, the very people my father used to always describe as Bengal's suffering poor. It was as if the notebooks were telling me that the golden Bengal he had dreamed of still needed to be built. As I turned over the pages of the notebooks and caressed his handwritten lines, it seemed to me my father was telling me, 'Don't be afraid, dear. I am with you. Go ahead and be resolute.' It seemed to me that God had miraculously sent a message to me to be indomitable. In the midst of all the grief, pain, and depression, I had found a shaft of sunlight." And the reason why I wanted to read this, because I hope that this program gives you a lot of hope. I'm very proud of the guests that we have today. This is a platform where everyone gets freedom of speech and gets to say their own viewpoints and what they want to say. And thank you so much to everyone who's already commenting. That means a lot, and please keep the comments coming. So we're going to start now, and we're going to get on with the show. So I'd like to bring on to the digital spotlight Fazi Maknoon, my first guest.
Yes. Hello.
Maknoon, how are you doing? How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Yeah, I'm doing
Great.
good. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course, and thank you for coming on and being my first guest on this show. So the passage I've got already aware of. So I'm just going to give some context to our audience before I let you read. So what Macnon is going to read is a passage that is very early on in Bongobondo's life. It's where we really start to see his interest in politics come through and his rebellious nature. And now Macnon's going to read the passage, and then we're going to have a great conversation afterwards. Go ahead, the stage is yours.
Yeah, thank you. In 1938, a significant event of my life occurred. Mr. Haq was then the Prime Minister of Bengal and Mr. Sahrawadi the Labour Minister. They were scheduled to visit Gopalganj. A huge meeting was to be organised for their visit. It was decided to hold an exhibition on the occasion too. After all, the two leading leaders of the Muslim community of Bengal would be coming to town, and all Muslims of the area were excited at the prospect. I was still in school then. As I noted before, I was older than the boys I used to hang out with, and so was given responsibility of the volunteer brigade. I formed the brigade with everyone who is willing to join it, regardless of their religion or beliefs. Later, it became apparent that the Hindu boys were leaving the group one by one, unable to figure out why this was happening. I asked a friend what was going on. He told me that the Congress Party had directed them not to participate in the event and had even instructed them to make sure the leaders were not given a grand reception. They were also asked to ensure that shops were made to shut down on that day. In those days, Hindus owned 80% of the shops in the town. The news surprised me, since we didn't treat Hindus or Muslims differently then. I was very friendly with the Hindu boys. We used to play, sing, and roam the streets together. Our leaders said that because Mr. Haq had formed the government with the help of the Muslim League, the Hindus were fuming. This information had an electric effect on me. Mr. Haq and Mr. Safrawadi were to be given a reception. We had to do everything that was necessary to achieve this. I formed a volunteer brigade with the help of the Muslim boys. Some scheduled caste Hindus joined our brigade too. They did so because Mr. Mukundu Bihari Mullik was a minister of the cabinet and he was part of Mr. Haq's entourage. The Hindus formed a majority of the town's population. People came from the villages, armed with all sorts of weapons, ready to fight if there were any attempts to thwart the event. There was even the possibility of a communal riot breaking out. Mr. Haq and Mr. Safrawadi arrived as scheduled, and the meeting was finally held. The exhibition was inaugurated formally. Everything took place peacefully. Mr. Haq went to the public hall, while Mr. Safrawadi went to the mission school. Since I was a student of the mission school, I welcomed him. He inspected the school and then walked towards the launch, and I followed him all the way. He asked me a few questions haltingly in Bengali that I answered as well as I could. He looked at me and asked my name. I wanted to know about my family. A government official told him about my family's origin. He took me by the arm and asked me affectionately, "Don't you have the Muslim League in your area?" I told him there was no such organization, and that not even the Muslim Student League was active here. He made no other comment, but wrote down my name and address in his notebook. A few days later, I got a note from him thanking me and asking me to meet him if I ever went to Calcutta. I replied to his letter. This is how I started to write to him from time to time. Another noteworthy event occurred at this time. The Hindus and the Muslims were somewhat wary of each other. There were a few Hindu villages surrounding the Gopalganj town. One or two Muslims were tortured in them. I had a class friend named Abdul Malik, who was a kinsman of Khondukar Shamsuddin Ahmed. One evening, probably in March or April, I was coming home after playing football. Khondukar Shamsu Haq, aka Basu Mia Mukhtar, later president of the Awami League subdivision, called me and said that Malik had been forcibly taken to the house of a Hindu Masaba leader called Saran Banerjee and beaten up there. Could I look into this matter? He stressed that since Malik was my friend, I should try to free him from their clutches. I decided to waste no time. I gathered some students and went to their house and requested them to let Malik go. A gentleman called Rampada Dutt started to abuse me verbally as soon as he saw me. I protested and immediately sent for the boys of my band. In the meantime, Ramapada went to the police to inform them about me. 3 policemen arrived. I declared that they would have to let Malik go or I would snatch him away. My uncle, the late Sheikh Sirajul Haq, was then a student and used to stay in a hostel. He was the first cousin of both of my parents. I had an uncle in Narayanganj called Sheikh Zafar Sadiq. His older brother had died soon after he had passed his matriculation examination. When he heard that I had sent for people, he came to help me with a group of boys. By this time, we were involved in a fight with the Hindus. Both sides were in the thick of action. We managed to break the door and snatch away Malik. The whole town was tense. Nobody dared to say anything to me. That day was a Sunday, and my father was in Tungapara. He was expected back the next day, but the distance he had to cover was almost 14 miles. My father used to go to Tungapara every Saturday and return on Monday in his boat. The Hindu leaders huddled together with some Hindu officers and filed a case against me. In it, Khandaka Shamsul Haq Mukta was accused of instigating this crime. The charges against me were homicide and of starting a riot and looting. In the morning, we found out that my uncle Mukta, the Muhuri clerk of Khandaka, Shamsuddin Ahmed, MLA, Zahur Sheikh, my good friend and neighbor, Sheikh Nurul Haq, aka Manik Mia, Saeed Ali Khandaka, my class friend, Abdul Malik, and a lot of other students were also among the accused. They seem to have left no sons of distinguished Muslims of the area out of the list. At 9 in the morning, we learned that my uncle and quite a few other people had been arrested. But how could the police arrest us? The officer at the police station was feeling embarrassed. At 10, the police officer stood outside in the field, chanting to someone, clearly intending to let me use the opportunity to disappear. Our house was located next to the town hall. My cousin was from Madhurapur. He told me, "Why don't you go to the neighboring house?" I declared, "I'm not going anywhere. If I do, people will say that I was afraid." At this point, my father had came back from his trip. The police officer followed him into the house. He told my father what had happened. He showed him the warrant for my arrest. My father said, "Take him." The police official said, "Let him eat. I am leaving a policeman behind. He has to be in the police station by 11 a.m. If he delays, it will be difficult to get bail for him." My father asked me, "Did you get into a fight?" I kept quiet, indicating thereby that I had. I took my lunch and then went to the police station. I saw that 8 others, including Manik and Saeed, had already been arrested and brought to the station. As soon as I came, they rounded us all up and took us to the court. We were not handcuffed, but had guards surrounding us. The police officer in the court was a Hindu. When we arrived there, he had shut us in the small room in the court jail that was next to the courtroom. As soon as he saw me, he exclaimed, "Mujibur is a violent chap. He had attacked Ramapada with a knife. He shouldn't be given bail under any circumstance." I retorted, "Don't talk nonsense. Such talk won't do you any good." Those who were sitting with the police officer said, "Imagine the cheek of the boy." The others asked me to keep quiet. Later, I found out that the others had lodged a complaint against me for trying to kill Ramapada with a knife. He was in a bad state and had been admitted to the hospital. I had actually fought him with a stick. When he had tried to hit me with it, I had grabbed it from him and I had hit him back instead. In the process, I had managed to wound him in the head. The Muslim loyals appealed to the court for our bail. However, only Mukta was granted bail. We were to be sent back to the jail. The SDO was a Hindu and wouldn't grant us bail. The court officer attempted to handcuff us. I protested, but the others restrained me, and so I had to go to jail. It was a sub-jail and consisted of a single room. One part of it was screened off and had been set aside for women prisoners, but since there weren't any, we were kept on that side. We were allowed to have food, clothes, and bed linen sent to us from our homes. After 7 days in prison, we were allowed to go. Within 10 days, all of us had been given bail. Telegrams were sent to Mr. Haq and Mr. Sahrawadi. People were sent to Calcutta to contact them too. Gopalganj town was all astir. My father was friendly with the Hindu lawyers of the town. All of them respected him. The two sides met on a number of occasions and finally decided that all proceedings would be withdrawn and the case dismissed. We would have to pay 1,500 taka as compensation. All of us pulled in to pay this amount. My father had to pay the most. This was the first time in my life that I had been to jail.
Thank you, Mahmoud. That was amazing. Really great narrating. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who's been giving words of encouragement while Mahmoud was reading. It was really nice, made me happy to see. And thank you for everyone who's supporting the program so far. So, Mahmoud, as you know, the reason why I chose this passage was because this is where his rebellious nature really comes through. And he's very honest with the reader about his, I want to say aggressive, but rebellious nature he had when he was younger. He openly talks about when he spoke up against police. He speaks up against issues within society. And it would have been very easy for him, because I know the stereotype as a South Asian child is you're quiet, you don't question anything, you just deal with the status quo. But he's very open and he said, no, like I fought, I was rebellious, I argued, I questioned things, I challenged authority figures. How important do you think it is for public figures to be this transparent and honest with their audience and their readers?
I think showing public speaking is like speaking vulnerability, putting yourself out there and making an authentic connection with your audience in that way, I think is quite important. I believe if you want to create an impact, it requires being yourself. A speaker who is able to connect and inspire with an audience leaves their own ego behind and shares a message. I think it's kind of like offering a gift. You think about what the receiver would like, not what you would like. You want to give the perfect gift and see the pleasure on them. Think of your speech as a gift you'd like your audience to enjoy and remember. I think the speech or your movement isn't necessarily about you, and I don't think there's really a quicker way to lose an audience than try to like push something onto them or constantly talk about yourself. By focusing on what your audience needs, it ensures that you are delivering an audience-centric message. So I believe in conclusion that being vulnerable and open is very important, and that if you want to show a message, if you want to show and lead a message, this is the best way. You need to be yourself to be able to deliver this message.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And how do you think us, when we've got someone being so vulnerable and being honest with us, how do you think we benefit from that? How we can utilize that honesty?
Well, I believe that it's much easier to hide behind facts, but that's not how you create a compelling and lasting connection. I believe that stories are at the heart of the most successful presentations, like real relevant stories, shared in a way that the audience to feel that they are alongside you in the story.
Yeah.
I think nailing a presentation isn't about being perfect, it's about being prepared and present in the moment. It's not about how skillful you are in the rhetorical technique or vocabulary, but rather speaking with words and emotion from your heart to resonate with others.
Yeah.
When you stop trying to present a technically competent speech and focus on connecting at a human level, it would be much more beneficial to get your point through. And that's why I believe that this honesty is beneficial for everyone.
Thank you so much, Mahnoon. That was amazing. I really enjoyed your narration. I'm going to move on to Afrin now as we move on to the next stage of his life. So thank you so much. Hi, Afrin. How are you? How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
So much for being a guest. So I'm going to let you get on with it. So I'm just going to give again some context to the audience. So the passage that I've asked Afrin to read is where we've kind of moved on from his rebellious nature, where his charitable nature really comes through. So for context, this is, let me just get my facts right so I don't get it wrong for you. So it's the Great Famine that broke out in 1943. And this is where we really see Bongobhondo come through with the collective effort, working with the community, showing innovation and sort of an entrepreneurial spirit. So I'm going to let Afrin take it away with her narration. Thank you.
Thank you. Around this time, I returned to Gopalganj to join in the relief work being carried out there. Gopalganj was surrounded by Jessore district, on one side Khulna and another Barisal. On yet another side, I returned to my hometown to find the situation there was appalling. Most people had turned to nothing more than skin and bones from the lack of food. Gopalganj's Muslims were business people and the land was fertile. They were usually able to make ends meet. In the face of the current situation, many people advised me to hold a conference to which we could invite Mr. Shoradi and other Muslim League leaders. Seeing the gravity of the situation in our 3 districts where they would perhaps do something to provide relief for our people and save them from death, we sat down with our workers. After much discussion, we decided that our region had so far not witnessed a major conference, which had its own agenda and creation of Pakistan. Organizing a conference on the subject would inspire the people of our 3 districts to support the idea of Pakistan. In other words, we would be able to achieve 2 goals: popularize the idea of Pakistan as well as bring relief to our people. We invited workers from all parts of our region to attend the conference. After some discussion, we decided that we would call the conference the South Bengal Conference for Pakistan. We also resolved to invite people from all 3 districts. All meetings were scheduled to form a reception committee. A secretary had a chairman would be chosen from among senior leaders for party, but none of them who were asked agreed to hold these positions since the event would cost a lot of money. The country, after all, was reeling from the famine, and raising funds under these circumstances was a difficult task. In the end, everyone made me the chair of the reception committee, and the businessman from Jessore named Molvi Afriuddin Mullah the secretary. I left for Kolkata to invite our party leaders. When I went to see Mr. Shoradi, I found Mr. Kajwaja Shahuddin with him. Mr. Shoradi told me, "As you can see, I am terribly busy. Nevertheless, I will try to come. Request Mr. Shahuddin too. And surely he will go." Reluctantly, I invited him and agreed to attend. Mr. Tamizuddin Khan was then the education minister. He too hailed from Faridpur. We invited him and he also agreed to join us. I also invited Maulana Abdul Rashid Takabadish and Mr. Habibullah Bahar Chaudhry. By this time, Mr. Maulzim Hussain Chaudhry had left the Congress party. He joined the Muslim League and became secretary of the Provincial Muslim League Relief Committee. I used to work with him in distributing relief, and he showed immense faith in me. He had managed to procure a lot of medicines, clothes, and money, and wanted me to be with him. As he distributed them, we would have to send clothes to every subdivision. Booking freight space to send goods during wartime was a difficult task. You would have to spend at least 10 days inquiring before you could find space to send some items. Often we would have to keep accounts. At times I would even have to tie the relief clothes into bundles. However, I never said no to anything that I was asked to do. In any case, when I asked Mr. Maulzim to accompany, he agreed readily. I worked out a schedule for our activities, raised a bit of money from the more affluent people of our committee, went to the villages and started our work. My people now became more active everywhere. My father took on the onus of catering. The cooking of the conference would be done in a government official's house, but soon people disagreed over the arrangements. When things started to get out of hand, it was decided that everything would be done in our Gopalganj house. I constructed a pandal made of sails. To do so, I brought sails from those who owned big boats in our locality. I thus managed to construct a pandal where we could seat 2,000 people, and we would be able to do without incurring too much expense.
Thank you, Afrin. That was amazingly well done. So like I said, the reason why I asked you to read this passage was because, again, his charitable side really comes through. And what was really encouraging to me, and I'm wondering if it was encouraging for you, was we really start to see where he really stood up for the ordinary people right from the beginning. And what's quite interesting is what I really love is that I love the fact that he talks about when he was younger, because we can see the changes throughout his life as we go through the book. But it was really encouraging for me to see that his love and passion and protection of ordinary people and the poorer class, it never left him. Like, it's still really prevalent when he goes into politics, obviously at an older age. And what I found is working with a lot of successful people is many of them who have a lot of impact, they're always thinking of the greater good. Still, I see a lot of public figures as they go up the ladder, they kind of forget their roots and they have sort of individualistic, selfish motives. How important do you think it is to be always striving for the greater good, whether you're an individual or a public figure?
I think it's always good to do so because you never know what the end result may be. So either good or bad, but mostly good. And by doing something good, it's not just for yourself; it's for your whole, the people who strive for you. And by doing so, it can lead to much greater things in the future. For example, like we gained our independence by just a man just from a small village, and he managed to do so much for us.
And what I really like is how it's not about just, he doesn't constantly talk about what I did, what I did, what I did. He's always name dropping people.
Yeah.
He's always mentioning many people that helped him, which is really important because collective effort is where really social change comes from. And he's quite young during these passages, but he's got a lot of mentors and he's got people who are a lot older from different generations helping him. And the reason why I wanted to do a program like this was because I really wanted a platform where the younger generation feel like they can speak and they can voice their opinions. But I also, like, the reason why I also asked Rumi to join was because I wanted all generations to kind of work together. So why do you think it's important in any part of history for every generation to really come together rather than it being young generation versus old generation?
I think it's important to come together as like each generation, because by having one generation, you can't do that much by yourself. But having people from so many places, positions, you can do a lot of things. And by joining together, you can make such a huge difference for so many people out there.
True. I just want to say thank you to Afrin for reading the passages for us and for giving such thought-provoking opinions on the content. I really enjoyed that. And I also just want to give a great big thank you to everyone who was cheering Afrin on with the comments. I was smiling as you were reading because I could see all the comments coming through. So please, follow the channel and share where you see it's appropriate. Yeah, and also we're seeing all different kind of people. It's not just Bangla people. There's a lot of people joining in, so that makes me really happy. Okay, so Afrin, I'm gonna go on to a columnist and poet, Rumi Hook. But thank you very much for your contribution. Hi, Rumi. How are you?
Hi, Sajiti. I'm fine, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm all good. I'm good. Thank you for joining. You're our final participant, but you've been with us with me from the very beginning. So I'm really happy for you to be on the first episode. So the passage that I asked you, it's a short passage, but the passage that I asked you to read was because from Mahnoun and Afrin's passages, it's where he's very, innovative, he's very entrepreneurial, he's very go, 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 he's quite positive. But what I really liked about this passage is his youth really comes through in the passage that you're about to read, where he talks about his failures. So again, like I was saying with talking with Mahnoun, it's really important for a reader and a public figure to be honest. And in your passage, he talks a lot about failure. So I'm going to let you read that and then we'll get on with the conversation. So go ahead.
Yeah, before I get on to reading, I just want to thank you, Sajiti, for inviting me here. And it's a great honor to be a part of this. And thank you to Mukti TV for this platform to allow our youngsters to kind of shine through. Okay, I'll start to read my passage now.
Yeah, no worries.
All the leaders knew me to be a very dedicated worker. All of them used to treat me affectionately. Mr. Sahrardi had told them to attend the conference. They were also aware that not attending the conference would be a snub to me, and that the students of Calcutta would become restive if anything was done to upset me. And so I managed to land up in Gopalganj with the leaders in tow. They were greeted in style. The whole Gopalganj rang with cries of "Long live Pakistan!" The leaders were delighted with the huge turnout. The meeting was going to start as scheduled, but a storm that had struck the town the previous night had destroyed the pandal. The sails had been torn, the shreds, and the strong winds torn the sheds, the sails in strings. The meeting, however, was held on the stage, despite the tattered sails, the leaders that left that night. But my plight was quite desperate afterwards. The leaders left that night, but my plight was quite desperate afterwards. Where would I get the money to pay the bills? The sails had been damaged, and no one would give me any money to repair them. The leaders had offered no financial assistance. However, some of the people who had lent me the sails were very fond of me. Many of them were well off, and their sons had joined my team of workers. These people went away, taking their torn sails with them. But a few didn't, and encouraged by the malcontents, refused to accept the torn sails. They wanted money as compensation. What was I to do? I was depressed by the way things had turned out. My mother and my wife had come to Gopalganj from our village home 3 days ago to look after the guests. Overworked, I had become unwell. In the evening, I had high fever. My father asked me why I looked so shaken. He had already spent a lot of money on the conference, but he wasn't a rich man, and I couldn't ask him to help me any further. However, he came up with a solution to my problems on his own. The people who had been affected but were not well off, he sent away after giving them some money. But one businessman had lost 8 to 10 sales and wanted to be paid for all of them. He threatened to sue me if I failed to do so. My father said, "Take some money and have them repaired, but you will gain nothing by threatening us. Those who have been encouraging you to take action against us don't know that proving to court that we took your sales will be quite difficult." The man nevertheless asked his lawyer to file a case against me. In the end, though, he decided not to press charges. Meanwhile, I became very ill. Renu looked after me during my illness. We had been officially married in our childhood, but it was only in 1942 that the marriage ceremony was held publicly with the usual rituals. Slowly, I started to get better. I would have to go to Calcutta again, now since I had to sit for my examinations. But I hadn't studied at all for them. I had spent all my time doing relief work. My father said to me at this time, "Son, I have no objections to you engaging in politics. That you are participating in the movement to attain Pakistan is also a good thing. But please don't neglect your studies. If you don't study, you won't become a good human being. And one other thing, if you have sincerity of purpose and honesty of purpose, you will never be defeated in life." I never forgot those words of advice he had for me.
Yeah, so I love that last part. I actually, I wanted you to read the whole of, but really what really stuck to me was that very last advice that his father gives. And one thing that really stuck out for me that he talked about a lot, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, in the book, is his connection and his relationship with his dad. So obviously his dad's old, he's his dad, so he's got respect for him, and there's just a little bit of fear there. But it's really obvious that they have very honest conversation with each other. And one thing that I found, and the reason why I actually really wanted to do this platform is because I specifically wanted to celebrate young British Bangladeshis. And one thing this is relevant. It's going to sound like I'm going off a tangent, but it's relevant. So one thing that really happened to me as I was growing up, when I was in my formative years, in my teenage years, I don't know if Mahlan and Afrin have ever came across this or had this before, but I had a little bit of an identity crisis where I had the sort of the British side of me, or my British friends, thinking I'm too Bangladeshi, and then the Bangladeshi side of me thinking that I'm too British. Where I really felt like I couldn't marry the two. Whereas now I'm quite unapologetic about the fact that I grew up in Britain, but I'm also very Bangladeshi as well. And what I noticed is, it's one thing that always people to always tell me is that, you know, we don't have a lot of young people in research or culture, heritage, and the arts. But I also found that, so for example, in my eyes, politics isn't a very traditional route. I would say a traditional route for our community is being a doctor or a lawyer, that sort of thing. And so for his father to be like, at a time, this is in the 1940s, so he's very young, you know, his father to tell him at the time that, you know, I don't mind if you go into politics. We really stress education, and I swear by education, I really believe in it. But I don't mind if you go into politics, but I want you to be honest, and I want you to have purpose. Why do you think that we've kind of veered away from like upholding, maybe having a career in like writing or research or anything like that, and we've gone down a more traditional route of being like a doctor or a lawyer, that sort of thing?
Right. Firstly, I would like to say, like you said, it is a huge identity crisis we all go through. I think most of us during one time or another of our lives. Now, for a young person to actually be going through this, a young person growing up in this country, however you have a route from somewhere else, it is quite difficult for somebody else to understand. But this is when we need our parents and our guardians' support. And you, Sajuti, have been very lucky. And I would say I have been very lucky myself, even though I was born back in Bangladesh, but I grew up in this country. And all my life, it has been kind of like, okay, I am Bangladeshi, but I'm also British. And you know, like you said, this, but with age, I think the comfort of both worlds come. Now, secondly, you said the relationship between Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and his father. We can see it's a strong bond where the parents, the guardians, are actually supporting him in his role, where traditionally, yes, like you said, we encourage our children to say, you must be a doctor, engineer, or lawyer, and those three routes are the only careers that were recognized. But now, thankfully, it is changing. It's changing very much. Slowly but surely, it's changing. We are now recognizing the fact that we need to actually encourage our children to be their level best. Now, to be one's level best, they have to be happy in what they're actually pursuing. Now, the relationship between the parents, the guardian, and their children is where it's utmost extremely important, so that they can understand each other and say, actually, Dad, Mom, I want to actually be a performing artist, or maybe, yeah, into politics, or yeah, into writing. I don't want to be a doctor. This is where I just want to say, this is an example where I have a friend who grew up in Bangladesh. He studied in Bangladesh, MBBS, became a doctor because his parents wanted him to be a doctor. But he was always into engineering. So then he actually came to this country and then totally changed his career, left his medicine and just did what he wanted to do. But that could have been avoided if the parents had understood, if they had that relationship, the friendship between the parent and the child, if that was there, if that was present, then he could have not exactly wasted, but he could have had a more of an understanding to what he wants to do and explore his interests. And I think that is very important. Yeah.
Said, because so I think it really takes, the thing is, you can come back from it. So for me, for example, no one knows this, but for a long time I was really afraid of saying that I was an author. People would ask me, "Oh, what do you do?" And I'd be like, and I would automatically go, "I work here," or "I do this," and I was really scared of saying I'm an author, because then if I'm not a bestseller, at the time I was just starting to write, now I'm like, I would say like, oh, I'm a published author. But I was always really scared of it. And now I've just slowly been like, you know what? No, like whatever, because I think a lot of the times when we're writing or we're doing music or, we kind of see it as a side hobby. So we're like, oh no, I just, I sing a few songs. But even though you might be someone who's had done concerts or you've done lives or anything like that, or you've done shows, but you'd always be like, no, I'm a doctor, but I do this too. Like you can have both. Like my mom always says to me, like, and I love that you don't have to pick one career and just stick to it. You can be a doctor and then still be a writer, not on the side, a writer at the same time. You can be all of them. But I think it really comes down to like purpose, which I'm going to move on to. But like you said about your friend, I think it can be a little bit too late. For some people, you really need to have that independence, parents from a place of protection. We don't want our children to start a career path that maybe immediately you're not going to get a 50K salary, but who's to say the line they're not going to have a 7-figure? But you've got to encourage that. So the reason why I asked you for that to read that passage was because that bit where he says you need to have purpose and sincerity, and I have many mentors who are always preaching that to me. You need to have purpose. So in your opinion, what do you think that purpose really is? And for the younger generation growing up, like some people might jump from what career they want to do. They might have complete confusion of what they want to do. And some might be really committed to one career. And then like me, so I studied law and now I don't want to be a barrister. I have no intention of being a barrister. But there was another identity crisis being I just spent 3 years doing a law degree. Was that completely useless? But now I realize that my law degree has made me very different in my writing. So again, I've kind of changed my purpose and made it more unique to me. So like I was saying, my question to you is, in your opinion, how do you think we can create purpose in our lives, and how do you think the younger generation can kind of navigate that journey in itself of finding purpose?
Well, like you said, Sajati, you did a 3-year law degree. I would like to stress the point that whatever degree you have is never to a waste. It's always useful. That's kind of like your background theory work done. Yeah. Now, whatever career you choose to kind of pursue later on in life after those 3 years is totally, those 3 years, just keep it in mind that was not wasted at all. Now, purpose in life. I would say from a very young age, I mean, we all go through so many stages in our lives where we change, which as we change physically, our emotions change, our interests change, we grow, and then we grow more, and our interests kind of may stay the same, may not. But the important thing is whatever that child or that young person is concentrating on. For example, say if a child was into art, now she or he is very much into art and is focused. For me as a parent to come and say, well, art isn't important, you need to go and study and do your maths first. Actually, no. Stress the point that yes, for this time you need to focus on all areas of your subjects. However, after that, you want to focus on art, please go ahead with it. And that's how I think the purpose of that child would be. Okay, so my parents are not disagreeing with my aim or with what I want to do, but yes, it is important, and they will kind of like find their way, find their aims, and then kind of pursue that. But it's very important to support that child in whatever aims they have. That's kind of, as a parent, as a teacher myself, this is what I think. This is how we need to kind of pursue it.
And I also think you made a really good point about that. But I also think, I guess this is kind of like me getting a little bit preachy to Mafna and Afrin, because I've got a few years on you, only a few. Where for sometimes when I'm having moments of I really don't know where I'm going with this, I think it's like what we can learn from Sheikh Mujibur Rahman is, I think at the forefront of everything he did, he always thought of the greater good, which was the conversation I had with Afrin. So sometimes when I'm having moments of I'm not sure what career position I don't know which, I'm making this investment, but I'm not really sure where it's going. But I always come from a place of, is it harming anyone or is it actually having the greater good? So sometimes it's a lot better to come back to just that simple of question of, is it for the greater good? So thank you, Rumi, for that. To hear your perspective was really important. That's why I wanted to bring you on, because I think it's really important to bring all the generations together. So we have a couple of minutes left before the show finishes, so I wanted to follow with my other guests. Let's start with Mahnoon. Is there anything you want to add from hearing this discussion? I actually thought of asking you and Afrin about, so we touched on sort of the elevation and sort of encouraging British Bangladeshi people and children as they're growing up in terms of their culture and heritage. Is there anything that you would say from your perspective, from your experience, that you would like to see more in our community in order to encourage us to be more proud of our heritage, or maybe even that move forward? I think that we're very proud of our history, but I think, we're very proud of history, and that's an incredible thing. But one thing I always preach is that you should always be proud of your history, but you need to think of ways of steps forward. So I wanted to ask you, Mahnoon, what you thought that we could do, or seeing that you might think would be really helpful in promoting sort of a harmony between the younger and the older generation in our community.
Well, I believe that they need.
Can you hear me?
I believe that the older and younger generation, they need to try to get onto the same level, because they have two different perspectives. Because they grew up in different environments. You know, I grew up in Britain, they grew up in Bangladesh, so they see things very differently. Their parents taught them in a different way. But I believe that the younger generation, the parents should not let them. They should allow them to do what they want, but also like guide them in the right direction. Because while the younger generation should do what they want, they shouldn't completely go off task. So say, for example, I wanted to do like drama. It doesn't mean I should completely just stop doing maths, English, those type of things. I believe that I need to put focus on everything, but I shouldn't be limited to what I do.
Thank you so much. That's really, really true. And I think both sides can really learn from each other. So me and my mum, we always actually sit down, and she always tells me stories from, and what I realize is sometimes when me and my mum might get into arguments where it's very much the two generations like clashing, when we sit down and it's a very calm conversation, we realize that we actually have a lot of similar experiences. They've just manifested in different forms, you know? So I think that rather than going on the defense of, oh, the older generation are really patronizing or anything like that, or the younger generation don't really care, when actually we both have a similar purpose and a similar mission in preserving our heritage, but also moving forward with it. And I think also what we can learn is what I love when I was reading this book, what I loved is I could see a lot of parallels to the modern age, even though this was like 50 years back on the stuff that I'm reading about. I'm seeing a lot of parallels because history repeats itself. So Afrin, I wanted to know from your perspective that when you're reading the passage or from the discussion that we have, is there anything that you've seen that or you've heard, or any opinions of what you think, same as Mahnoon has said, that what the both generations can do? Or also, do you think that there's anything that the younger generation needs to take into account in order to make impact and to make a name for themselves, rather than feeling that they're just either following in their parents' footsteps or like the older generation footsteps? And I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you to everyone. I've just seen coming up a very nice comment. So to everyone who's been given encouragement and showing engagement, it's made this journey and this episode very enjoyable to record. So Afrin, I'm going to let you answer that question. So as I was saying, is there anything from this episode, anything that you've picked up from reading the passage that you think that would really help the younger and the older generation sort of come together? And just before I let Afrin speak, just to let everyone know that if you're watching but you'd prefer to watch on YouTube, then our YouTube channel is Mukti Online Channel BD. So please feel free to follow, like, and share. Okay, now Afrin, I'll let you talk away.
I think it's important to understand that two generations, we both live separate lives, to be honest. So one's in Bangladesh, one's in the UK. And you have to understand, sometimes some parents force you to do something you don't want to do, but you have to make them proud. Or you've seen like your relatives, they've had like higher positions, they have very academic achievements that they've made, and you feel very pressured being one of the youngest, or just watching them as you grow up. And you're just like, I have to do that to make my parents proud. Because in our community, to be honest, most parents talk about their child's achievement. They don't see like arts or like those type of topics as something to be proud of, so almost, but they think if you take that road, it's not that much, it's not that stable compared to being a doctor, lawyer, compared to those other degrees you can get. So I think by I don't explain it, by having like both generations come to the same level and come to a mutual understanding, you can see how we feel, because don't we want to do what we want, and we don't want to feel pressured by other people. And by doing this, we can help like the future generations and make them less pressured, because to be honest, in school there's children just stressing over their grades, and it's not even the topic they want to do, it's just for their parents, and they still feel so much stress and affecting their mental health, daily life, and they just feel unhappy.
Thank you for that. That was a really good point that you made, and that's something. So we didn't read it, but there's a passage in the book where Sheikh Mujibur Rahman talks about his education, and he's very honest. And I think it was maths, where he talks about how he tried his hard, like he really, I think he was ill, and he took his maths exam, and he wasn't good at maths, and he openly said, I wasn't good at maths. And like I was talking with, where he just says, look, there some subjects I was good at, there's some that I was. I think what we really need to break down is the stereotype or the ideal of the perfect child, and that is in every community. I think we're quite what's the word, tempted to be like, oh, in our community this is what it's like. But then after having I don't know if you guys I don't know if our friends in university, but after being in university, meeting different people, I realized that a lot of communities actually have a lot of similarities, and where the sort of the archetype of the perfect child really comes through. And I love that you mentioned the subject of mental health, and how the like comparison is a thief of joy. That is a very profound quote, but it's true. When you're being compared to other people, it's not constructive and it doesn't help you. And what I loved is the vulnerability and the honesty of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman when he said, look, I was great in these subjects, I was bad in these subjects, I still worked hardest. So I think it's really important for anyone, if there's any young British Bangladeshi or anyone who's watching this who feels like compared to, or feels like they have to live up to a certain ideal. For example, for me, I worked insanely hard at school. I worked so hard because I wanted to study law at the time. And I love that Rami had said that always, because I remember being told and I wanted to be a lawyer so badly. But the reason why I wanted to be a lawyer so badly is because I wanted to be a human rights barrister. And the reason why I worked so hard to get top grades was not for my parents. I come from a family where my siblings were very, very clever. And I was the kind of the odd one out where my siblings could get A's and A stars. They have great work ethic. There's not shaming my siblings whatsoever, but they have a great work ethic. But they could get A stars and A's very easily, and I couldn't. I'd always be the one that was very close to getting a B. I would just get an A, or I would just be just one mark off an A, and it would kill me. Like, it would kill me not having that grade. So when I was reading about Sheikh Mujibur and talking about, hey, there was a moment where I was so ill. I was terrible at maths, but I was so ill, and there was a chance where he could not do a maths exam, and he was like, come hell or high water, I'm going to do that. This isn't what he said, but it's basically what he was saying, where come hell or high water, he was going to do that maths exam. So for me, when I was like, I'm not kidding, blood, sweat and tears to get my grades at my A level so I could do law. And the reason why I did it was not to make my parents proud. My parents really didn't come into it when I was talking about it. When I was wanting law, it was really about, I want to be a human rights barrister, I want to make a difference, and I want to help people. And I think that's what people should always, if there's any younger people watching this, or anyone who's at a crossroad in terms of their career or feeling some self-esteem problems, is always put service at the center of your purpose. Always think about how you're going to help other people. And like at some point, like there's going to be some parents that will judge their kids for not getting the A's and A stars, and I hope to God that we still don't do the comparison of cousins, because I hated being compared to my cousins when I was younger. I hated it. And now my parents don't do it all that much with my brother. But I think one thing that I learned is that every single person is their own individual. They all have strengths, and there's not necessarily failures. I don't believe in failure. I believe in feedback, and I believe in sort of stepping stones to success. But everyone has their own strengths, and they have things that they need to work on, and that's going to be in different forms. So someone who doesn't test well, so I didn't test well when I was in school, but I'm an incredible writer. But I used to be compared by my English teacher. My English teacher would compare me and my sister, and my sister was the better writer. So never ever thought that I could be right, not once. And then by doing a favor for doing speeches, something clicked in me where I was like, I'm actually an incredible writer. But growing up, all those years, I would constantly be told by my teachers I wasn't a good writer. So I think younger people or anyone, they want to go down an avenue, but they don't know, am I clever enough to do a doctorate? Am I talented enough to go into music? You need to understand that just because of someone's limitations as they've placed on you is not going to be what their limitations are, not a reflection of who you actually are. It's a muscle that you have to train. You're not going to be perfect at that one subject. You're not going to be perfect in an instrument. You have to train, and you have to build yourself up to that point, but you shouldn't let anyone's limitations keep you in a box. So one thing that I loved about, again, that would come up because I need to wrap it up, but one thing I loved about Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, and this is what Mahnoon was reading out to us, is his vulnerability, where he talks about the times he failed. So what Rumi was speaking about is the times where he was where people were getting angry with him, businessmen were getting angry with him because he'd failed an initiative, and he had to ask his dad, and he had to ask his father for help. And as you said, so when he talks about having to helping people in the famine, it wasn't to look perfect, it wasn't to his impressive parents, it was because at the core of it, he just really, really cared. And I think that's what we need to remember. We're taught from a very early age that, you have to climb that ladder, you have to climb that ladder, you have to be successful. Very selfish reason, but I don't think he had at any point thought that he wanted to be a politician for the glamour. He wanted to be a politician for this. I think he really came through that he just wanted to help ordinary people all the time. And yeah, I think that's what we need to remember when we're bringing in the both generations together, because I understand the older generation want to protect us, want to help us, but the reason why I created this platform because I wanted a spot where it was just all hands on deck for young participants and young talents, where they felt that I can say what I want without any judgment. And I think that's really important, because we're not going to be able to progress as a community. We're just going to stay on the same level if we're not willing to challenge the old attitudes that we have about comparison, or about what jobs we should have, or what roles women might have in the household or in society or in their jobs, or what men might have as well. Yeah, but that's pretty much it. Is there anything else that anybody would like to add from the discussion before I wrap it up?
Can I just say, I'm not sure if you can hear me clearly, because I was kind of losing you at times. So whether that's my network or yours, I'm not sure. Yeah, I just wanted to I know it's we're coming to the end of the program, and I just wanted to say one more thing before we go, that it's important to understand that in 1942, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, how his kind of relationship with his parents shows that when he was in kind of like trouble with the businessman, how his father actually, instead of saying, "I told you so, you shouldn't have done," they actually supported him. Now, how progressive Bangabhontho's family was from then. Now, this is something to follow as an example for our own children and our own family, to say, yes, support your children, support in their interests, but equally to the children, I would say, please understand, your parents, yes, traditionally they wanted you, would like us to be a doctor or be a lawyer or etc. It was only because those careers were thought to be a kind of a lifelong career, where stability was definite. That's what we thought. That was the idea behind it. So everyone wanted their children to have that stability. It's not because they don't think you're good enough for this and that. It's because they wanted that stability for you. However, yes, us parents, we need to understand that, yes, times have changed. It doesn't have to be, you don't need to be a lawyer, doctor, or whatever. Any passion a child has, support them in that passion, see where it takes them, be there when they fall, because we all do fall at times, and then be there to rejoice in their success as well. And yes, like Sayuti has always said, aim for the greater good. See in your, whatever it is, whether it's art, politics, medicine, whatever career path you take, just try and see, are you giving something back to your community? And when I say community, I mean everyone around you, the greater community, and the world in general. What can you give to your neighbors, your friends? That's all, and to humanity itself. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. I couldn't think of a better way to end the program. Thank you so much. So I'm just going to take a moment to say thank you to everyone who's watched the very first episode of Recitation of the Unfinished Memoirs. I think this might be the first ever show that we've got to a platform for young British Bangladeshi talent. So thank you so much. I want to take a moment to thank everyone who liked, followed, shared the content, shared comments during the show. And I just want to take a moment to give my biggest gratitude to Mukti online channel for showcasing us, produced by Bongobhondo Sangskritik Jote, London branch. And one last thank you to my incredible guests, Kazi Mahnoon, Afrin Qureshi, and columnist and poet Romy Hook. I couldn't have thought of better guests to help me and to be with me on the first step of this incredible journey. So from everyone here, I want to
it has been my pleasure. Well done to you, and well done to you guys, Mahnoon and Afrin. I'm really proud of you all. Thank you for having me.
Not a problem. Thank you all. And this is a goodbye from all of us. See you next time.